Okay, so I just wanted to get on here and talk about my views when it comes to duties of those who had life imposed on them involuntarily, and that their life enslavement is being maintained through force, that they don't have any duties. And the reason that I'm doing this discussion is because there have been several anti-natalists who are no longer anti-natalists because they have decided that it is now acceptable to procreate in order to save others, right? To save animals, to save other humans, to make the world a better place. So I've decided to come up with my own philosophy, which I think is coherent, to basically bridge the gaps when it comes to anti-natalism. Because to be a life abolitionist, you would necessarily have to be an anti-natalist, but all anti-natives are not necessarily life abolitionists. So under my philosophy, a life slave has no duties. So they'll tell you that you have duties, right? You have duties to society, you have a duty to contribute, a duty to make the world a better place, a duty to work within a system, a duty to accept incremental change. Um, no. Under my philosophy, which is life abolitionism, a life slave has no duty except to secure his or her own freedom. You are enslaved. You were forced into existence without consent by your parents, or as I refer to them in my book, I'm calling them life enslavers. You were forced into existence by your life enslavers who acted to serve their own interests. You are kept enslaved by the master state that prohibits your right to opt out while extracting your labor, your taxes, your compliance. The disposal rights test, which I articulate in chapter 1, proves that you do not own your life. The state owns it. The master state owns your life. Therefore, you are enslaved. This is life slavery. And under life abolitionism, the philosophy of liberation from this enslavement, a life slave has two obligations and only two. The first is to secure your own freedom, and the second is to dismantle the system of life slavery. That is all, everything else that they demand from you, every social obligation, every civic duty, every expectation that you participate, contribute, improve, or sustain a system of life enslavement is illegitimate. Now let's talk about why a life slave owes no duty to the system or to anybody. First, because the slave lacks agency. Agency requires freedom. Agency requires the capacity to make meaningful choices. Agency requires the option to refuse, to opt out, to say no and walk away. A life slave has none of these. But even deeper than this is the premise that you do not own your life. Therefore, you cannot have duties. Duties require ownership. Duties require the capacity to dispose of what is yours, to choose. If you do not own something, you cannot have duties regarding it. A renter has no duty to improve the landlord's property beyond the lease terms. A borrower has no duty to enhance the value of what they temporarily use. An enslaved person has no duty to maintain or improve what their enslaver owns. And by the enslaver, I'm referring to the master state. Under the legal doctrine of coverture, a slave is not liable for his or her own actions, right? The master is responsible for the slave's actions. The master is legally culpable for everything that the slave does. The slave has no agency. You do not own your life because you lack disposal rights. The disposal rights test proves this conclusively. You do not have the right to dispose of your person, your services, or your property without interference from the state because you do not own your life. You cannot have a duty to use your life productively, to contribute to society, to improve systems, to help others, to participate in civil life, to make ethical consumer choices, or to do anything else with existence that you did not choose in the first place. All claims that you have duties are based on a false premise. that your life is yours to direct. It is not. Your life is controlled by the master state, which prohibits you from disposing of it. You are not the owner making choices about your property. You are the property of the master state. You did not choose to exist. Your parents forced existence on you. From the moment of your creation, you were forced into a game you never agreed to play, with rules you never accepted, and a system you never endorsed. The master state maintains this in slavery by prohibiting the right to exit. You cannot leave. You cannot opt out. You are a captive. A captive has no duties to their captor, and then they will claim that you benefit from society, you use roles, you receive services, you enjoy protections. But this is the logic of the hostage taker who demands gratitude for the merger, the meager food, right? The meager food provided during captivity. So as I said in a recent discussion that I had, if somebody puts you in a cage and feeds you, they're not doing it for your benefit. They're doing it for their benefit, right? It is not for my benefit to be in a cage. Yes, I'm in a cage. I'm going to eat the food because that is what is available to me. But I didn't choose to be in a cage in the first place. So if you let me out the cage, then there's no telling what I might do. But I am not responsible for anything that I do while I am held captive within that cage. You were forced into existence and you are forced to continue existing. Some minimal maintenance is provided, right? But it's always inadequate, always conditional, and based on your forced participation. The system is designed to extract maximum value for your continued captivity. The master state forces you to exist and then demands you pay taxes to fund your own captivity. Capitalism forces you to labor and then extract surplus value from that forced labor. Democracy forces you to participate and uses your coerced participation to legitimize the very system that enslaves you. These are not social contracts. These are protection rackets. A contract requires voluntary agreement by parties with the freedom to refuse. You never had that freedom. You were born into captivity. A contract signed under duress is void. A contract signed while in prison or a contract signed while enslaved is void. A slave has no capacity to contract. You own nothing. You do not own your life. You have no duty to participate. You have no duty to make the world a better place. Your only duty is to yourself, to secure your freedom and to dismantle the system that denies you your freedom. Now, there are many people who will argue that we should fight for incremental change, right? The problem with this is that incremental change does not free slaves. It makes slavery more tolerable. It does not dismantle the system. It stabilizes the system by reducing pressure for fundamental transformation. It does not challenge the legitimacy of enslavement. It accepts enslavement as given and negotiates only conditions. So I'm going to get to the point why I'm making this video. I reject incremental changes. I rejected this as a basic proposition. I'm not going to fight for incremental changes. This is the reason why they talk about individual consumer choice. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to dismantle. I don't care about individual choices. I care about dismantling the entire system. It's not about individuals. It's about the system. The enslavers want you to do this. They want you to focus on all concessions. A shorter workday here and there, a minor benefit there, a marginal improvement in conditions. Why? Because these concessions cost them little while ensuring your continued compliance. They diffuse resistance. They make people think it's not so bad, things are getting worse. Maybe we don't need radical change after all. This is the function of incrementalism, to preserve the system while making it slightly less unbearable. Consider the history of chattel slavery. There are reformers who said, let's make slavery more humane. Let's regulate working conditions. Let's prevent the worst abuses. Let us gradually improve slaves' treatment. These reforms, while they continued, did not end slavery. They prolonged it. They made the system more politically defensible. They allowed defenders of slavery to say, see, We are being reasonable. We're making improvements. There is no need for abolition. Abolition came not from incremental reform, but from recognizing that the entire system was illegitimate and must be destroyed completely. This is the same of life slavery. The system defenders will offer you incremental changes. They will expand medical assistance in dying slightly, but only for terminal illness, only after psychiatric evaluation, and only after waiting periods, only after multiple physician approval. They will tell you this is progress. It is not progress. It is prolonged enslavement by making it marginally more tolerable for a few while leaving the vast majority enslaved. They will have calls for social services while providing inadequate health care, insufficient housing, means test benefits. They'll tell you this is all progress toward a social safety net. They will even talk about AI, how AI is going to liberate us while you remain enslaved. I reject all of this. Every incremental reform is designed to preserve the system by releasing just enough pressure to prevent revolution. And here is the insidious genius of incrementalism. It makes people invested in a system's continuation. Once you have fought for years to achieve some small reform, you become psychologically committed to defending that reform. You begin to think, at least we have this much. We cannot risk losing what we have gained by pushing too hard. You become a defender of the status quo you once opposed, especially in the cases of the ex-antinatalists who abandoned antinatalism because they think that we should now procreate in order to provide palliative care to wildlife. This is why the system offers incremental change, not because the system has compassion, but because incremental change neutralizes resistance. The life abolitionists reject incrementalism completely. We demand comprehensive dismantling of the entire system. We demand the right to opt out. We demand a mandatory inheritance, ending procreation, the return of extracted surplus value, elimination of all immunities for state actors. We demand full socialism to be paid by the society which benefits from your enslavement. The system of life slavery maintains itself through exploitation. Those who benefit from the system, parents who procreated, capitalists who extract surplus value, state actors who derive power from prohibition on the right to opt out, democratic majorities who benefit from your involuntary existence, have no incentive to end life slavery voluntarily. They understand the arguments. They know they impose suffering. They continue anyway because exploitation benefits them. Your labor, your participation, your contribution makes the system function. Every hour you work generates surplus value for capitalists. Every dollar you spend funds businesses and generates tax revenue. Every act of compliance legitimizes state power. Every incremental improvement you achieve makes the system more tolerable and therefore more stable. By contributing, you are sustaining your own enslavement. They will say this is nihilistic, that you have a duty to help others who suffer within a system, that refusing to contribute hurts vulnerable people. This is the logic of the hostage situation, where the captor says, if you do not cooperate, others will suffer. The correct response is not to cooperate, it's to recognize that the captor, not the hostage, is responsible for all suffering that occurs. Your parents impose existence on you. The state prohibits your right to exit. Capitalists extract your labor. They created this situation. They maintain it through violence. All suffering that results is their responsibility, not yours. If you refuse to participate and vulnerable people suffer as a result, that suffering is caused by the system that made your participation for survival, not by your refusal to participate. The solution is not for you to resume participating. The solution is to dismantle the system that requires forced participation in the first place. The best way you can help people is by not making life slavery more tolerable. It is by ending life slavery completely. This is the abolitionist position. Chattel slavery was not ended by slaves working harder to improve plantation conditions. It was ended by slaves refusing to work, by abolitionists making slavery economically and politically unsustainable, by forcing the system to choose between maintaining slavery through ever increasing violence or ending it. Life slavery will not be ended by your dutiful participation in incremental reforms. It will be ended by life slaves refusing participation, life abolitionists making enslavement too costly to continue, by forcing the system to choose between granting humane exit rights or openly deploying massive violence to maintain prohibition. Your duty is not to benefit the system. Your duty is to make the system continuation as difficult and expensive as possible. Those who support life slavery accept everything that comes with it. If you support the system of life slavery, everything that comes with it is your fault. You accept the oppression. You accept that people are forced to continue existing against their will, trapped in an involuntary existence, suffering on a perpetual basis because the state prohibits the right to exit and deploys violence to maintain that prohibition. You accept this exploitation. You accept that people are forced to labor and the value they produce is extracted by capitalists. You accept that people are systematically exploited. You even accept the exploitation of animals. Now let me get to this animal argument, right? The reason why I'm not including animals in my philosophy of life abolitionism is because animal exploitation is part of the system of life slavery. It is not separate. It is not optional. It is integral to the economic and social structures that maintain forced existence. When you support life slavery, when you vote for prohibition on the right to opt out, when you procreate, when you defend forced participation, you accept animal exploitation as part of what comes with that system. Now, there are people who will say that you can choose to go vegan. This response misses the point entirely and reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what life abolitionism demands. First, individual dietary choices by enslaved people do not change what supporters of the system accept. If you support life slavery, you support the system that includes animal exploitation. Whether any particular enslaved person chooses veganism is irrelevant to the fact that you, as a supporter of life slavery, accept animal exploitation as part of the package. Second, and most crucially, promoting veganism to save life slaves, promoting veganism to life slaves as a solution creates false hope that perpetuates enslavement. If enslaved people are told to go vegan and you're doing your part, they may believe that individual ethical consumption somehow addresses or mitigates life slavery. It does not. Going vegan does not secure your freedom. Going vegan does not grant you the right to opt out. Going vegan does not end the prohibition that traps you. Going vegan does not dismantle the system. This creates a dangerous illusion that life slavery becomes acceptable if enslaved people make the right consumer choices. Those who benefit from life slavery can then point to vegan life slaves and say, see, you can be ethical within the system of life enslavement. You don't need liberation. You just need to make better ethical choices. This justifies your continued enslavement by suggesting that individual behavioral modifications are sufficient and that the system itself does not need to be dismantled. This is exactly what enslavers want. Slaves who believe that moral consumption within slavery is a substitute for freedom. Third, it is exploitive and unethical to demand that enslaved people liberate animals before securing their own liberation. A life slave's existence is involuntary. A life slave did not consent to exist and is prohibited from exiting. To tell such a person, you must first concern yourself with liberating animals before you can demand your own freedom is to impose additional obligations on someone who already bears the burden of a forced existence. A slave has no duty to anyone except to secure his own freedom, demanding that life slaves prioritize animal liberation enslaved while remaining enslaved themselves is demanding that the slave serves other interests before their own liberation. This is precisely the kind of obligation that life abolitionism rejects. The proper sequence is dismantle life slavery, which liberates both humans and animals. When procreation ends, no humans are forced into existence, which also means no new demand for animal exploitation to sustain those life slaves. When the system of life slavery collapses, the economic structures that depend on animal exploitation collapse with it. Animal liberation and human liberation from life slavery are not competing goals requiring prioritization. They are interconnected outcomes of dismantling the same system. But the entry point, the moral foundation, the immediate priority must be in the enslavement of those who already exist and prevent the creation of new life slaves. Everything else follows from that. You don't get to support the system of life slavery and then claim you oppose the outcomes. The outcomes are incidental, they are essential. They are what the system is designed to produce. If you vote against the right to opt out, you are choosing to force people to continue existing against their will. Their suffering is your responsibility. You choose it. If you enforce prohibition as a police, as a psychiatrist, as a legislature, as a judge, you are actively maintaining captivity through violence. You are the direct instrument of enslavement. Every day of suffering endured by those you prevent from exiting is suffering you cause. If you procreate, you are imposing existence on someone without their consent to serve your own interests. You are creating a new victim of life slavery. Their entire lifetime of suffering is something that you created. You extract surplus value as a capitalist. You are stealing the product of forced labor. You are profiting from their slavery. Every dollar of profit is value stolen from those who have no option to refuse. You don't get to do these things and then claim innocence. You don't get to maintain life slavery and then express regret about suffering. You chose this. You benefit from this. The suffering is yours. This is the burden life abolitionism places on enslavers. Moral responsibility for all consequences of the system you maintain. You cannot support prohibition on the right to exit and then express concern about the suffering. The suffering exists because you prohibit the right to exit. You cannot support forced participation in capitalism and then express concern about poverty. The poverty exists because you support a system that requires it. You cannot procreate and then claim you meant well. You impose suffering without consent. Your intentions are irrelevant. The harm is what matters. If you're unwilling to accept responsibility for all the suffering that life enslavement causes, your only option is to stop supporting the system. There is a particular form of complicity that deserves moral condemnation. Those who procreate while claiming they're doing so to make the world a better place, to help fix the system, to create change agents who will improve conditions for those enslaved. Life abolitionism categorically rejects enslaving new people in order to make the conditions of life slavery more tolerable for those currently enslaved. This is perhaps the most morally perverse justification for procreation. It acknowledges that life slavery exists, acknowledges that people suffer under this system, then deliberately creates new victims while claiming this creation somehow helps existing victims. Listen to the absurdity. I recognize that existence is imposed without consent. I recognize that people suffer terribly under life slavery. I recognize that the system is unjust. Therefore, I will create a new person, also without their consent, also forcing them into the system of suffering because maybe they will help make things slightly better for others. This is using human beings as a tool. You create someone, force them into existence, impose all the suffering that comes with life slavery upon them, and justify this imposition by claiming their forced existence might benefit others. You enslave someone to fight slavery. You impose suffering to reduce suffering. You violate consent to promote autonomy. The eternal contradiction is absolute. If you truly believe life slavery is wrong, you would not create new victims of it. If you truly cared about reducing suffering, you would not deliberately cause more suffering by forcing new people into existence. If you truly value consent, you would not commit the ultimate violation of consent by creating someone who cannot possibly agree to be created. The person who procreates to make the world a better place is no different from the person who procreates for emotional satisfaction or genetic lottery. Both impose existence without consent. Both, both create a new victim of life slavery. Both force someone to bear millions in costs plus immeasurable suffering. The claim justification, whether I wanted meaning in my life or I wanted to create someone who would help others, is equally irrelevant to the person forced into existence. Moreover, this justification reveals a fundamental acceptance of life slavery's continuation. If you are procreating to create people who will improve the system, you have already conceded that the system will continue. You are not seeking abolition. To you are seeking better management of slavery. You are recruiting new slaves to make slavery more tolerable rather than ending slavery entirely. Life abolitionism rejects this entirely. We will not create new victims to help existing victims. We will not impose suffering on some to reduce suffering for others. We do not violate consent as a strategy for promoting consent. We do not enslave people as a tactic for ending enslavement. The only ethical response to life slavery is to refuse to create new victims while working to free those already enslaved. This means stop procreating with no exceptions, no justifications, no matter how noble your stated intentions. Creating new people perpetuates life slavery, and no claim benefit justifies that perpetuation. Work to dismantle the system using those who already exist. Build movements from the enslaved, not by enslaving more people to join the movement. Demand liberation for those already trapped, not by trapping more people in hope that they will assist in liberating others. The moral calculation is simple. Zero new victims is always better than any number of new victims, regardless of what those victims might accomplish after being forced into existence. Those who procreate while claiming to fight life slavery are the worst kinds of hypocrites. They claim to oppose enslavement while actively enslaving others. They claim to fight suffering while deliberately causing it. They claim to value freedom while violating the most fundamental freedom, the freedom to never have been brought into existence in the first place. Life abolitionism recognizes this for what it is, a rationalization that allows people to procreate while claiming moral righteousness. It is selfishness dressed in the language of activism. It is imposing harm while pretending to reduce it. We absolutely reject this. No one should be created to improve the system. The system should be dismantled by those who already exist, and no new people should be forced to exist under it. Your only duty as a life slave is to secure your own freedom. Your only obligation is to demand justice, to dismantle the system of life slavery. This is moral clarity. This is recognizing that life slavery is illegitimate regardless of how well intentioned the enslavers are, regardless of how many benefits the system claims to provide, regardless of how many incremental improvements have been made. Slavery is slavery. It must be abolished completely, and those enslaved owe no duties except to secure their own liberation. Your only duty is to be free.